Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be ranking all 50 books I read in 2023. This isn't a usual video. It is upfront gonna warn you it's gonna be very long. Definitely probably my longest video. Normally if you've ever watched any book videos on YouTube, you have probably seen people rank books. It's usually with a website called Tierlist. I couldn't get that website to work. It wanted me to sign up with my email, and I didn't want it to send to my Gmail and just all this stuff with email. So I didn't end up I didn't end up using that website. So I made my own version on Google Sheets. It took forever, but it was worth it. So that's why this tier list looks different. But hey, it works. I read a large variety of books this year. Some were horrible, some were really good. So I thought it'd be fun to rank them and give my suggestions of which you should read. I would be pleasantly surprised if anyone watches this video through, because I'm sure it's going to be long, and I'm probably not going to edit it because that's going to take a while, and there's not much to edit for this sort of video. So yeah, again, I don't expect a lot of views on this, but if you did watch it all the way through, comment, because I'll be proud of you and impressed. So yeah, I'm going to try not to go into detail for each book, because again, that's going to take a while. Plus, I want to avoid spoilers since I'm suggesting these books and hoping that at least the good ones you're going to read. But yeah, without further ado, I'm going to start. These are in a particular order, not in the order I read them. You can see that order in the short I posted recently. I stacked them up in order, but these ones are all over the place. I did try to put the series in order. Starting off, we have Divergent. And we're going to start with the worst first, because, not going to lie, I hated this book. I don't know why this one's gray, but, yeah, here's Divergent. I hated this book so much. I need to do a video about why I hate this book so much, because the characters were terrible, the world building was terrible, the plot was terrible. It was not, I didn't like this book. I know this one's really popular, but it just wasn't for me. Next up, we have Harry Potter, because yes, I finally read that book this year. Kind of crazy that it took me so long. But for me, I didn't hate it. I just didn't care for it so much. So I'm going to put it in not a fan. And I do have 5 tiers, but I'm not really basing these so much on what rating I gave them, because I did rate all these on Goodreads. But I'm not basing this on what rating I gave them. It's kind of just, this is different than your normal 5-star rating. But yeah. Maybe it's just because I read Harry Potter when I was older rather than younger that I wasn't able to enjoy it, because it just felt childish to me. I have heard the rest of the series is a lot better than the first book, so I hope to eventually read the rest of it and hopefully like it, but right now it's not a priority, so I haven't read the second book or the rest of the series, but maybe I'll get around to that eventually, but I didn't really care for the first book. Next, I have Fallen Renegades, which is by a person here on YouTube. I love this one a lot. It was a sweet book and really cool. So, yes. Then there's Arithmetus. I also love this one a lot. It's one of Brandon Sanderson's books, which is an author I got into this year, and his books are just the best. I could go on and on. I will recommend all of them today in this video. So, yeah, read Brandon Sanderson. The Arithmetus is really good. There's supposed to be a sequel to this book eventually, but there's not. So it worked well as a standalone so far. Next, I have the three Warriors books I read this year. I only read 3. First up, we have Shadow. This one, it was okay. If you watched my stack video, I borrowed this one from the library, because I haven't really cared to read the newest Warriors books. It's not so much a priority. This one, yeah, it was okay. Next, we have Thunder. This one, I'm going to put it with the okay tier, but it was better than Shadow. It was a lot better. This one was a lot better than most of the Warriors books that they've released recently. I liked it much better than any recent Warriors book I read in the last probably 3 years. Next, we have One Star's Confession, which I didn't hate this one. I know a lot of fans do. I didn't hate it. It was kind of boring. It was poor writing, but it wasn't terrible. It just didn't it didn't introduce anything new. It could have been so much better, but it wasn't like horrible. So I don't hate it, but I wasn't a fan. If you want to see more of my opinions on that, you can watch my video on it. I'll try to link that. Next is the second Wingfeather Saga book. I read the first a year or two ago, 2021 probably. It took me a long time to pick up on the series again because I was bored by the first book. But this book was a lot better than the first one. It was a lot more interesting. I have the third and fourth book. I just need to read them. But yeah, this one was okay. Then Alcatraz versus Evil Librarians, which is Brandon Sanderson's middle grade series. I'd say this one was also okay. It wasn't my favorite. I didn't love it, but it wasn't bad. I didn't care for the plot so much, but it was funny. The jokes in it were great. Something you'd expect from only Brandon Sanderson. Next we have Skyward, which is, again, another Brandon Sanderson book. You can tell that's most of what I read this year. This was my first Brandon Sanderson book, and it gave way to all the rest I read this year. And I'm going to read all his others, hopefully, this year. This one was literally one of the best books I've ever read. It was so good. I would recommend this to everyone who watches my channel. I love this book so much. It was the best. Next, Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. This one it's the sequel to Skyward. It was okay. I didn't love it, but it was good because it's part of the Skyward series. It just had a setting change. Same for its sequel, the third book in the quartet, Cytonic. It was okay. I need to read Defiant, and I hope it wraps up the series well, because the first book was stunning, is the best, and then the second and third were disappointing. Then there's Skyward Flight, which is a collection of short stories. I like this one a lot better than books 2 and 3 because it brought back some of the original things from book 1, and it's just done a lot better. Then we have Caraval. This book, it's another one that I hate. I almost posted a video on this one, and I ended up not posting it. I had it scheduled to post, and I ended up deleting it. One day I'll do a review on, maybe I'll just do a whole video on the books I hate. But there's not many that I passionately hate. But Divergent is one, and Caraval is one. This book was worse than Divergent. There's a lot about this one, but again, this is a non-spoiler review, so I won't say anything why. The Call of the Wild, that's a classic, so I read it. I grew up with White Fang. That was my first chapter book. So I read Call of the Wild because I hadn't read it yet, and again, White Fang was so important to me, and it's by the same author, so I read it. It was okay. I didn't have this, it was a sweet book about a dog and a man, and it was fun, but it didn't stick out as a favorite. Same with Edge of Extinction. I read the first book in this series, what would it be, 6 years ago? And I knew there was a second book, I just hadn't gotten my hands on it, and I kind of, over the years, lost motivation to read it. But I did finally read the second book. It's a two-book series. I finally read it this year, and it was so good. It wasn't, my favorite, but it was good because I didn't care so much for what it was about and the plot and such, but it was really well written and fun. This was the Fork, the Witch, and the Worm, which is the Aragon short story collection. I wasn't really a fan of this one. I did like Murtagh's short story in that, and I'm excited to eventually read his book that came out recently. But I didn't really like this short story collection. It just didn't have the stuff I loved in the original series. Then there's The Hobbit. I read this for school. I had already read it, so this one's a little different. But I'd say I love this one a lot because it's just a story that I hold dear. I love Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit I don't love it as much as Lord of the Rings, but I love it a lot. What is going on? It's near and dear to me. as you'd say. Then we have Six of Crows, which I'm having to scroll way down now. Six of Crows definitely goes with literally one of the best books I've read. I love this book. I still need to read the author's other books, but this book was so good. It was amazing. I don't know if you saw my video, but I literally dressed up as Annette Edge for Halloween because this book was just great. Another great book is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, which, yeah, again, you'll see a theme of Brandon Sanderson in this video because his books are just the best. And this book was 1,000 pages long, and I loved it so much. It was just the world building, the writing, the character development. I know the length will deter a lot of people from reading it, but if you're up to the challenge, I would totally read it. It's not a book like Lord of the Rings where it's a hard read. It's epic fantasy, but the prose isn't that complicated. So I would read it. The 1,000 pages will go by fast. It's just the best. It's one of the most well-written books I've ever read. And then there's its sequel, Words of Radiance, which I feel like a lot of series I read, the second book does not measure up to the first book. But this was a series where the second book was just as good, if not better than the first. I love this. I love seeing the characters develop over time. The climax of this one was amazing. It's just, the series is so good. Again, the second book was 1,000 pages too. There's 4 books in the series so far. There's going to be a 5th. It's going to be 5,000, probably end up being 6,000 pages to read, but it's worth it because those books are just so good. I haven't read the other rest of the series yet because, again, it's long and it takes time, but I liked it. I did read a shortish, it's not technically a short story, it's over 200 pages, but for the series, it's considered a short story, Edge Dancer, and it wasn't as good as the others, but because it was just short and didn't have as much depth. But I love this one a lot. It was a sweet story about a fun character in the series. But yeah, more Brandon Sanderson. We have Steelheart, which I like this one a lot. It was not one of my it wasn't like one of my all-time favorites I've ever read, but I love this one. It was really good. The first book was a good start to the series. I liked the world building and everything. Sheets is a little hard to use and finicky because it's not really meant for something like this, but it works. Firefight, the sequel, second book in the Steelheart trilogy, was also really, really good. I liked it a lot. It was even better than the first book. It was just really, it had so many cool parts of the plot. And then the third book wasn't as well written. It was just okay. I didn't so much like the ending of the series. It just kind of felt like it was, with the theming, it was going in a different direction than the series had built up for. It was still good. It just it was a little anticlimactic and disappointing. But it was still good because it's Brandon Sanderson. But yeah, next I read The False Prince, which, I mean, I didn't read it next in this order, but next we have The False Prince. This book was really good. I say I loved it a lot. The twist in it wasn't like, I didn't really care for the twist. It wasn't that big of a twist. And it just kind of, I didn't feel like there was any foreshadowing for it, but I also was not surprised by it. But it was still a really good book, and the twist was a fun twist. It just wasn't that well written of a twist. But I did really like the book and just the idea of the book. And I did read the second book in the trilogy, and I would say it was okay because it wasn't as good as the first book, but I did like it a lot. It's kind of in between 2 and 3. I still need to read the third book in the trilogy. I will eventually, but for now I've just read the first 2. I have a goal in 2024 to finish several series I started, including Wingfeather Saga and The Maze Runner and Descendants trilogy. Next, I read a few of John Flanagan's books that I had been putting off for years. The Tournament at Gorlan, honestly, I just put this one with okay, because I don't really remember much about it. It was an earlier in the year read, and there just wasn't anything special about it. I loved Ranger's Apprentice when I first read it, and then as I got late in the series, I kind of just slowed down and didn't care so much, because the books just kind of started getting a little boring. But I do like those books. They have a special place in my heart, even if they're a little boring towards the end. And I read the first 6 back in 2020, but I finally picked up on the 7th this year. And I'd say I'm not a fan, because it just didn't have the same fun in it as the first few books did, which is why I put off so long reading it. Then there's the 3rd book by John Flanagan. I just kind of read a few random ones that I had been putting off throughout the years. This one was okay. I did like, it was this year, it was your story about these kids. They're competing against each other to get some prize. Groups of kids. It's tournament sort of a thing. Like, you see it a lot. It's a common trope. But it was still a sweet story. Then I read The Maze Runner, which I would also say okay. I have mixed feelings on the apocalypse and world building they used. I liked the idea of the flare and plague and all that. I just don't know if it was completely done well. But the maze was really cool, and the first book was really fun. I was not so much a fan of the second book, though. It was just I kind of got bored with it. But then the 3rd book was really good. This is I'm not giving any spoilers for any of the books, but if you read this book, there's that one scene that will break every single person's heart who has read it, and I did really like that. That was a well-written scene. The rest of it, I didn't care so much, but for that one scene, it goes from 4 to 3. They have The Kill Order, which is a prequel. I wasn't really a fan. It just wasn't. It didn't stick out to me much. It was an okay book, but yeah, it wasn't anything great. And then there's Airframe by Michael Crichton, which is a lesser known book, especially probably among my viewers. But Michael Crichton's a science fiction author, and his books are the best. So I'm gonna put this as literally one of the best books I read. Basically, the plot, since it's not so well known, I will say, it's about this plane that crashes, which isn't spoilers. It's on the back of the book, and it happens in the first chapter. But basically, it's about the people that made the plane investigating what happened, and it's so well written, and it taught me a lot about just a lot of different things, because it's science fiction. It's kind of science fiction, but it's like there's not really anything made up in it other than just the plot. Like, the company's not a real company, but other than that, like, all the science in it is real, and so I don't know if it's quite science fiction, because it's not fiction in it, but it's like didn't actually happen. But it's so good. I love this book so much. It was great. I have a slight obsession with learning about planes now after that book, because it was just so fun. Michael Crichton is the guy who wrote Jurassic Park, and his books are so good and so well written. I mean, you read Jurassic Park, the book, and then you'll realize the movie is horrible. I mean, the movie is, this video is not about the movie. Maybe I'll do one on the movie comparing it to the book at some point, but like, the movie's iconic in its own right, but the book is so much better, so please read Michael Crichton's books. Next, we have another one of his books. I managed to read 2 of his books this year. The Andromeda Strain, which this one was kind of fun reading after 2020, and all that happened that year. Because it's about a plague, but it's a lot different. It's about what could have been a plague, but only one town ended up being infected. It wasn't like one of my all-time favorites, but I love this one a lot. It's a great book, and I'd also recommend reading it. Next, we have this one, which I hadn't even remembered reading this, but I did read it. I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. And so I kind of just, you get that after you finish a book or series or TV series that you love, you just feel that weird, like, almost like depression afterward that you were done with it. And I felt that after Avatar: The Last Airbender for a little while when I thought of this, whenever I'd think of the show. So I tried to get into the comics to just further the story and fill that void it left, per se. And I read The Promise, I think, and I read one of the ones about Toph. Two of them about Toph? I don't know. But, they were good, but this one was better. I wasn't, like, a huge fan of the other ones, but this one was okay. It was about not so much spoilers, because, again, it's on the back of the book. It's about Zuko finding his mom. It is cool. I felt like there wasn't too much foreshadowing in the series, so I feel like it's kind of just made up for the comics. But at the same time, it blended well with the series, so it was a nice add-on. I do wish it had been part of the show, almost. Then there's Warhorse, which is a book that I had wanted to read when I was young, and I never got around to it. So I finally read it this year, and if you want a sad story about an animal, read this book. Some people hate sad books about animals, and some people, like me, love them. I love reading sad stories. There's just something about it that's fun. And this book was sad. It's about this horse during World War I. It's basically like Black Beauty, if you've ever read that, but during World War I. And it's great. Another sad story is The Incredible Journey, which I will explain the stuff about this one because I feel like it's a well enough known story that it's not, and people aren't going to be as motivated to read it, so I might as well. It's no animals die in it. It's just like sad animals were separated from their owners and out in the wilderness, getting quilled or whatever by porcupines and stuck in rivers and all sorts of things. Like, none of them die, but it's just sad no animals are going through that. Tucker Everlasting, I read this one and I'm not a fan of it. It was just kind of boring. Not much to say about it. Varjak Pa, it's between not a fan and I hate this book. I didn't hate it, I just didn't like it. It was just a weird book. This is the one that everyone's going around saying it's better than Warriors. I know Warriors has a lot of its own faults, but this book was just straight up weird. I won't spoil it in case you want to read it, but it just kind of weirded me out, and was also, the beginning was really boring, so definitely not a fan. Borderline, I hated this book, but I didn't hate it. I just didn't care for it. Next is Guardians of Ga'Hoole, because again, this is one that people who love Warriors will recommend this book because they also grew up with it in their childhood, and I never read this one. I did grow up with Horses of the Dawn. I only read the first one, but it's by the same author, and I love that book. I tried to read Wolves of the Beyond, and I'll admit I got a few chapters in, and for some reason when I was younger, I was upset by the idea of the bear adopting the wolf because they're different species. I don't know. It was a weird hang-up of mine, so I never got far in that book. Maybe I'll eventually go back and read it. I did like this book, but I wasn't a fan. I don't think I'll ever read the rest of the series. It's again kind of just a thing like Harry Potter, where I think I would have enjoyed it a lot when I was younger, but I got into it when I was too old, and I just wasn't able to enjoy it. Next, there is The Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is one my dad suggested I read, and so I did. And it was, I'd say it's okay, but also kind of not a fan. It's kind of in between the two. I'll put not a fan because, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but then, again, it's not a book that so much people care about, but just the title's a little misleading, which I had an idea, and I know it's a classic, but I've read 2 of Jules Verne's books at this point, and I don't care for them a lot. It's not like I have anything against classics. I just don't care for Jules Verne's books. I've liked other classics, but this one it wasn't for me. Maybe I'll one day find one of his books that I like, but not yet. And see, speaking of classics, I'm not a person against classics. I read The Count of Monte Cristo, which I had to be determined for that book because it was 1,000 pages. I started it in July and finished it on New Year's Eve, half hour before midnight. So I barely made it, and this was my 50th book this year. So I almost didn't make 50 books, but I read this all evening, all the way almost up until it became 2024. And I really liked the ending. It was just a really long book. The beginning of this book was really, really good. One of the best books I've read. And I was really excited about it. And then the middle was just talking for 500 pages, which was really boring. But after that, the book started picking up again. It was really good, murder mystery, and then like a Romeo and Juliet side plot sort of a thing. It was just really, really good, and I would recommend it. Just maybe read an abridged version. I originally watched the movie, which is why I read this book. The movie is vastly different, and it's really good in its own right. But the book is good too, as long as you can somehow get past those middle 500 pages, which I feel like an abridged version might not have that. So I would recommend, if you read an abridged version. I thought I could be cool by reading the original, and I did end up finishing it, so I guess I am cool, but it was a lot. Finally, my last book, A Tale of Two Cities. I read this one for school, and that's the only reason I read it, but I feel like I would have eventually gotten to it. It was okay. It was just, I liked the story and all, but it was just the prose or whatever, the words used, it was just a lot in my head, and it just kind of frustrated me. But it's a good story, and I would recommend it to anyone who likes to read, just because it's classic, and you should read it for that reason. Because I will say I'm a supporter of reading classics, even though it's hit or miss. Some of them are good, and some of them I'm like, yeah, only read that because you have to for school. But yes, with that's really all that I have. I guess this video wasn't an hour long because I talk really fast. Sorry about that, but also not sorry because now you don't have to sit through an hour-long video. This wasn't actually 50 books, you might notice. I didn't include 5 or 6 books because 3 or 4 of them were that I counted toward my goal were books that I read in my Spanish class, and unless you know Spanish, you probably don't care at all. But also at the same time, they were literally only to learn Spanish through, and they were really cheesy stories. Like this one was about this guy going to Spain, and he got stuck with a storybook world or something. It was weird. They're weird books I had to read. I only read them for school, and they're just not worth mentioning for this. And then 2 other books I include because they're self-published by friends, and I feel like anything I had to say about them would be super biased, so I didn't include them for that. But otherwise, this is all the books I've read. I'm really excited to see what books I end up reading in 2024 because my to-read stack is a mile high, so I have a lot of books to get through. And a lot of notable series in that, so you'll have to watch out and keep an eye out for what I have in 2024 and what books I read then, because I'll probably be reviewing some, and then of course I'll probably do a ranking at the end of the year. But yeah, there's this. I don't think I'm gonna edit it. I think I'm just gonna straight post it. So if it's hard to watch, it makes sense. But I hope you enjoyed. If you actually watched this 30-minute video, let me know in the comments. I will post better videos other than this on my channel. So if you're a first-time viewer and for some reason watched this whole video, go check out my other videos because they're higher quality than this and probably more entertaining. Anyway, bye. Have a good day.